Caleb Rourke booked the table under my name, and for one clean second, I thought the reservation system had made a mistake. The Marlowe House tablet showed private booth, champagne service, guest consultant access, and his name sitting beside Brielle Knox, like she belonged in a room I had just been hired to help run. I stood behind the host stand, in the cream suit I bought for my first week as operating partner, while Poppy Larkin slid the tablet closer and lowered her voice. "Willa, this is your husband, right?" she asked. And I looked at the note again before I answered. "Yes. And that is not a business dinner." 3 weeks earlier, I had signed the operating agreement without posting a photo, changing my bio, or giving Caleb another piece of my life to measure. He thought I was still taking quiet consulting work around Raleigh, the kind he could mention at parties when he needed me to sound useful but not important. Then the front door opened, and he walked in with Brielle under his hand, his wedding ring missing, her burgundy dress pressed close enough to make the truth look practiced. She smiled at the room until she saw me, and Caleb stopped so hard, the man behind him almost touched his shoulder. "Willa," he managed, like my name had caught in his throat and turned sharp. I did not move from the host stand, because, for once, I had the correct place to stand while he tried to lie. Brielle looked between us, not frightened yet, only annoyed that I had appeared before she could become charming. Caleb swallowed, adjusted his cuff, and tried again. "What are you doing here?" Poppy answered first, polite enough to hurt him. "Ms. Stanton is our operating partner." Brielle's smile left before Caleb's did. I looked at the table he had booked with my reputation and said, "I work here. You made the reservation." Brielle Knox did not look like a woman who had wandered into someone else's marriage by accident. She looked irritated, like I had interrupted a meeting already decided before I arrived. The first proof reached me through Caleb's carelessness. A forwarded email with a joint separation statement attached and one comment left in the margin. The sentences were too polished for him, and the phrase "mutual transition" sat there like a napkin over a stain. I remembered reading it at my kitchen counter, not crying, not shaking, just noticing what the document tried to do. It said Caleb and I had grown apart with respect, that no one had been harmed, that any new relationship should not be misread as the reason our marriage ended. Then I saw the initials BK beside a suggested change. Replacing "my wife has questions" with "Willa needs space." That was when Brielle stopped being a woman in the background and became someone already editing my signature before I had been asked for it. Now she stood inside Marlowe House with a small leather portfolio under one arm, and the same language had followed her through the door. The reservation note called her a guest consultant, not a date, which told me Caleb planned to make the lie useful before dessert. "I thought you two were already separated," she managed, but her eyes went to the tablet. Not to me. I kept my voice even because the tablet, the email, and her portfolio were doing enough talking. "Women who believe that usually do not rewrite statements for another woman to sign," I answered, and Caleb's face tightened before hers did. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if volume could make the room belong to him again. "Willa, do not do this out here," he said, because he still thought shame was something I carried for him. I looked at the reservation, the name he had borrowed, and the access he had requested for Brielle. "You chose the room," I told him. "I am only reading the booking." Inside the private salon, Caleb tried to sit like a reasonable man, but his hand kept finding the bare place where his ring should have been. Dana Whitcomb was already there, one thin folder on the table and no appetite for theater. I had asked her to come because I was done trusting my pain to behave better than his lies. She looked at Caleb and Brielle, then kept her eyes on the folder. "This conversation stays clean," Dana said. "No threats, no posts, no performances. If anything moves forward, counsel handles it." Caleb breathed like that sentence had offended him. Willa, this is not what you think, he began, and Brielle folded her hands over the portfolio in her lap. I placed 2 reservation confirmations beside Dana's folder, both from restaurants where Caleb had claimed vendor dinners and both carried the same request for a booth. The names were different. The wording was not. And the same work perk account sat at the bottom of each receipt. Caleb looked at the paper longer than he looked at me. Our marriage was already over, he said, polishing the lie until it sounded gentle. Brielle leaned forward, softening her mouth into something she probably practiced before difficult clients. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, but her portfolio had 3 contact sheets clipped inside, and Graham Pike's name was on top. I touched the edge with one finger, not opening what I did not need to open, because the label was already facing me. Then why bring my client list to dinner with my husband? I asked, and she pulled the portfolio closer. Caleb shifted, because the question had landed where his story could not follow. You are making this bigger than it is, he said, and I slid 1 page across the table. It was a clean acknowledgement, drafted by Dana, stating he would not use my name, my membership, my contacts, or our marriage for any vendor introduction again. Sign it, I told him. He stared at the page, then pushed it back without touching the pen. Graham Pike sat at table 6 with his menu closed and his attention exactly where Caleb hoped it would not be. He did not hear what happened inside the salon, but he saw enough when Caleb came out too pale. Brielle holding her portfolio against her ribs, and Poppy quietly removing 1 name from the vendor tasting list on her tablet. In rooms like Marlowe House, people did not need a scene to understand a shift. A name disappearing from a list could speak cleaner than a raised voice. I walked back into the dining room as operating partner, not as a wife explaining damage. Graham stood before I reached him, the same steady chef owner who once watched me save one of his opening nights with calm hands and no applause. Everything all right, Willa? He asked. And I kept my answer professional because Caleb had already borrowed enough personal language from me. Marlowe House is tightening guest access, I said. No vendor pitch through private reservations, no borrowed memberships, and no introductions built on someone else's marriage. Graham looked past me once, toward Caleb and Brielle near the hall, then nodded more slowly than before. Brielle tried to recover before the room finished understanding her. She came forward with that careful smile. Portfolio ready? And introduced herself as a brand stylist Caleb had mentioned to him. Graham's expression did not turn rude, which made the refusal land harder. If someone needs to borrow a married man's wife to get into the room, he said, she may not be ready for the account inside it. Brielle's hand tightened around the leather edge, and Caleb looked at me like I had made Graham say it. I had not. For years, I had softened Caleb's unfinished sentences, covered his late arrivals, and turned his charm into something other people could safely trust. That night, I did none of it. Graham left after dinner and sent 1 message before I reached my office. I'll work with Marlowe House. Not Caleb. I read it twice, not because it surprised me, but because it was the first time someone removed him from a room and left me standing fully inside it. Dana did not make the claim sound dramatic. She made it sound like paperwork with teeth, which scared Brielle more than a raised voice. North Carolina had rules Caleb never bothered to learn because he believed charm was its kind of law. If a third party helped pull apart a marriage and left a trail, Dana could make that trail matter. I did not want a lawsuit because I wanted Brielle famous. I wanted her hands off my name, my clients, and the version of my marriage she kept polishing. Dana reminded me that evidence mattered more than anger, so I did not post her emails, answer her messages, or touch Caleb's phone. We kept what reached me legally. The forwarded statement, the reservation notes, the public story she chose to publish, and the client names she carried into Marlowe House. Brielle made the mistake before sunrise. She posted about being chosen by a man brave enough to leave comfort, with cropped champagne glasses close enough to Marlowe House linen to be recognized by anyone who knew the room. Dana saved it before Brielle thought better of herself, then sent a preservation letter through counsel by noon. That was when Brielle learned a public hint can become evidence when it stands beside a marriage she helped rewrite. Caleb called before dinner, and for once, his voice had no polish left on it. "Brielle is panicking," he said, as if panic made her innocent. "My company is asking questions about the vendor dinners, and people are going to think this is something ugly." I looked at Dana's folder, then at the copy of the post Brielle thought was clever. "They are not thinking wrong, Caleb," I told him. "They are only thinking without you explaining it first." The fallout did not arrive like thunder, but like canceled meetings, unanswered pitch emails, and one polite notice from Caleb's employer. They were reviewing whether work perks had been used for personal hospitality. Brielle lost 2 introductions before the week ended. Not because I shouted her name, but because the evidence had made the room smaller around her. Nobody wanted a brand stylist who turned someone else's marriage into an access point. Caleb came to Dana Whitcomb's office dressed like a man who had practiced humility in a mirror and stopped before it became confession. His shirt was pressed, his hair was neat, and his apology arrived with no weight behind it. Just enough softness to make a stranger think he had been through something. Dana sat beside me with one folder open, and Caleb placed a new statement on the table, like it was a peace offering, instead of a second attempt to rewrite me. "This helps both of us move forward," he said, and I noticed he did not call it the truth. The statement said our marriage had ended quietly before Brielle Knox entered the picture. It said we had separated emotionally, with mutual respect, and that any public misunderstanding around Caleb's new relationship would harm 2 adults trying to handle a private change with dignity. I read the page once, then again, because the cruelest part was not Brielle's absence from the blame. It was the way Caleb had turned my late nights rebuilding my career into proof that I had become distant. The woman who covered his missed dinners, fixed his guest mistakes, and smiled beside him at every industry event had been edited into someone too cold to keep. Dana did not let my anger speak first. She slid a counter-statement across the table, short enough that Caleb could not pretend to misunderstand it. I would not confirm a false timeline, would not allow my name in vendor introductions, would not approve language prepared by a third party, and would not discuss the matter outside counsel. Caleb read it with his jaw tight, then looked at me as if disappointment still belonged to him. "Do you really want to make me the bad guy?" he asked. I looked at the statement he had brought, the one that needed my signature to make his story walk upright. "I am not making you anything," I answered. "I am refusing to sign for a marriage you did not live honestly." His face changed then. Not loudly, just enough to show the door under the paint. "You would not even have Marlowe House without the people I brought around," he said, and Dana's pen stopped moving. I folded his statement back into thirds and left it on his side of the table. "The first person who removed you was Graham," I said. "And he never belonged to you?" Marlowe House held its tasting dinner 2 weeks after Caleb pushed the statement back across Dana Whitcomb's table. The invitation list was small, the kind of Raleigh room where chefs, buyers, and vendor reps watched who was welcomed before they decided who was safe. Caleb used to assume his name would appear because mine always had, and for years I let that mistake make him look connected. This time, the email never reached him, and Brielle Knox was not added as a guest consultant. He still came. I saw him at the front through the glass, wearing the careful smile he used when he expected a room to forgive him before he explained himself. Brielle stood half a step behind him, checking her phone like the right name might appear if she refreshed hard enough. Poppy Larkin kept her tablet low, and her voice, even when Caleb leaned closer. "There must be a mistake," he said, and Poppy looked once at the list before answering. "Your name is not on tonight's reservation." Through the glass, Caleb saw Graham Pike speaking with Dana, saw me beside them with a guest folder in my hand, and saw no empty chair waiting for him. That was how the room stopped opening for them. Not with shouting, but with a door held politely closed. Brielle sent me a long email before midnight, part apology and part accusation, claiming Caleb had promised our marriage was over and that she had only believed what he told her. I forwarded it to Dana without answering, because Brielle still wanted me emotional enough to become useful to her. Caleb lost the private tasting circuit he had treated like a second address, and Brielle lost the shortcut she thought would make her legitimate. I did not win by replacing her at his side, because that place had become too small to matter. I won by staying inside a room they could no longer enter under my name. Caleb accepted the settlement after Dana Whitcomb's discovery list reached his attorney, because the emails, reservation records, work perk notices, and vendor messages would not make him look misunderstood. His company did not turn him into a headline, but they moved him away from the private tasting circuit and cut his authority with high-end hospitality accounts. The man who once walked into every room as if my name were a key now had to wait for someone else to open the door. When he asked through counsel if I would at least keep Rourke socially until everything cooled down, Dana read the message once and closed the file. Brielle Knox signed her agreement without the confident language she used in Caleb's draft. She could no longer use my name, Marlowe House, Caleb's marriage, or any contact traced through me in her portfolio, and 2 accounts she had been chasing stopped answering before she finished apologizing. Poppy Larkin became director of member experience because she had followed the policy when everyone else was busy pretending it was personal. Dana ended the last meeting by sliding the signed pages into her folder and saying, "The best ending is the one that does not need a courtroom to keep repeating itself." I kept Stanton because it had belonged to me before Caleb learned how to borrow it. Months later, after a Marlowe House event ended clean and quiet, Graham Pike waited by the bar with 2 paper cups and no assumption in his hands. "Coffee?" he asked. And for once, the question did not feel like a door I had to guard. I said yes, not because I was ready to name it love, but because peace had finally stopped asking me to defend it. If this story felt familiar in a quiet place, I hope you remember this. Peace is not weakness, and starting over is not losing. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself with grace. Tell me in the comments when you first realized you deserved a calmer life.